Hi everyone, I'm Michelle and welcome back to my meadow. Today we are going to start uncovering things and get ready for now warm weather in Florida. But before I did, I thought I'd take you around and let you see how we covered things up and how they all fared after this Arctic freeze hit us along with the big parts of the United States here in 2022. Up in the front fruit guild, I opted not to do any covers because I felt like the nectarine and plums would be okay even in the cold weather, and for the most part I was right. They did really good right up until the frost. Now I'm going to take the camera around and show you some of these individual plants. If you've watched this channel a while, you know how much I love my salvia, but the frost really turned it into toast, and so at some point I will need to start cutting this back, but for now I'm going to wait and see how well it did and if some of it did actually survive and it's only the leaves that are affected. And while the nectarine leaves really took a beating already with one day of warm weather, I see new growth and even some fresh blossoms, so I'm feeling really confident about that. The jury is still out on the plum, but I have my fingers crossed that this is gonna bump back as the weather continues to warm up. The fig looks just fine, and in fact I see some green growth already happening again on the end of the fig. The persimmon should be a-okay. It's used to this kind of cold weather that we've had, and it already looks like we have some buds forming. Now, we don't even need to talk about the okra. I knew that the okra was going to be toast just as soon as it got cold because it does not like cold weather. But funny enough, some of the onions that I planted last year are showing up really well down there, and so I even have a few onions left over from last year that survived that frost with no problem. One of the pluses is that the Biden's alba is now under control for a little bit, so it'll be a lot easier to take that out here in the garden. Since I really knew we were at the end of the season on the peas, I did not bother to cover them up, and they did okay in the cold, but again, that frost that came the last day really burned them down. So now we'll start pulling these out. We'll pick the peas that we can and pull the rest of this out. The tomatoes that were in the stun bed, those plants are gone, but the carrots are still hanging in there. And I see that we actually have a new cabbage sprouting here just outside the bed. I did a little experimentation with the Cataly guava. I did not cover this one at all, and it was perfectly fine during the coldest temperatures. Again, same thing, the frost. So I think if I had any message for you, especially if you're a new gardener, worry about the frost maybe more than the cold for some of your plants. This is actually a plant that should be just fine. It likes a little bit colder weather, but it absolutely, the leaves did not like the frost. But there's greenery down here, and I think that it's still going to be in fine shape come spring. The things in the green stalk did not get covered, and they look exactly like I expected. The cilantro did just fine even in the frost, but all of the basil is toast, and even some of the flowers are toast, though I see a little bit of guyland leaves that are still there doing a-okay. For the dragon fruit, we covered those up with a flannel sheet and an extra blanket, and so far it looks good. I haven't peeked underneath, but I think all in all it looks pretty good here. However, the other things here that I didn't cover, even though they were against the house, also toast. The betony, which is in a pot, and the Japanese maple survived. Last year for the avocado, we went to a lot of trouble to cover it and put lights over it, and it felt like it didn't need it. So I took a chance this year and we put a sheet right over the tippy top, and we left some of this down here exposed. I actually do plan to prune some of this back so it was okay, but really, all things considered, it did really well. We have a few leaves that are frostbit. All things considered, I think they look pretty good. The very top got burnt, but this underneath looks good, and of course time will tell as the spring and early summer comes on to see if we get some avocados growing. For the raised garden beds, I attempted to cover the Thai eggplant back there, and I did not cover the sweet potatoes because they're safe under the ground. And so I will dig some of those up to check and see how they did. For covering the Thai eggplant, I did a terrible job. And I think if I was going to do this again, because I wanted to overwinter it, I would go ahead and cut back all of the plants, and I would have covered it with more mulch a lot deeper and really protected it. I suspect if I scrape in here, it's white through and there's no green, so I suspect it's gone. It might come back if I cut it down to the ground, but another one of those time will tells. For orchard row, we have a lot of citrus out here, and considering the rather haphazard way I covered things up, as you can see, it did really well even with the frost. I'm actually kind of surprised. We have lemon and Myers lemon and lime. I did pick the lemons and tangerine off, but overall everything looks pretty good. Even still have some blossoms on the Myers lemon. And I will definitely cover this differently the next time that I need to do this. I was running late, it was dark, and I did not prepare like I normally would like to do. Now this does look a little bit, but overall the plant looks good. Now interestingly enough, this Cataly guava is in a different place in the garden. It has a different climate, different microclimate. It's back here in the edge of the meadow under the trees, whereas the other one's a little more exposed, and it really doesn't seem like it got frost on it. And maybe it has to do with this location, because look at this navel orange here. The leaves on the backside look good, but on the front, the frost got them a little bit. So this really could just be an example of microclimate at its finest, showing us how nature kind of works together. So being back under the trees may have been a good thing for this orchard row. I did not cover the mulberry at all, and so this will be something we see in the next few months as it warms up, how that turns out. Last year I set up a greenhouse and I just couldn't get that done this year. This is the passion fruit trellis, and then I have plants all along the bottom, and I've wrapped it all the way around, but I can already see through the top of the fabric here that the passion fruit did not do well with the frost. We'll get this cover pulled off in just a second and take a look. The lemongrass doesn't look so great either, but it's better than I expected. That's going to be easy. I'm going to cut that back, and then we'll have the roots re-sprouting out more growth, and we use the roots and the stem of the lemongrass anyway. But I expected this, but it's still sad to see. Brace yourselves. Oh, the bananas. The frost and the cold were not our friend. And so we can see that all those luscious leaves are folded down now. But because we are just now entering official winter months, I am not going to cut these back, or at least for as long as I can stand it. I am going to leave them be, because they will provide extra insulation to the plants as winter carries on. Now there may reach a point that I just can't stand how ugly they look and I have to cut them back some, but I'm going to try to leave them and let them be so that they have the insulation they need. I did cut off the bunches of bananas, so they are hanging in the garage ripening. And there's one last group under here. Let's see how they did. But it looks like this bunch of bananas all was frostbitten. So I guess this one is a loss this time, but time will tell. I may let those grow out a little bit more and see what we get. Then we have the sweet potatoes and yams, and those leaves are all toast. So we're going to trim this back. I had laid some of the cut banana leaves over the top just to see if I could give it a little insulation. That was kind of useless, but all is well. All things considered, it looks actually a little better than I expected. Really, it's hard to know what's going to happen anytime you have a winter storm. Now let's take a look at that nursery now that we have the covers off and see how everything did under there. Well, the passion fruit is not looking so lovely. And I tried really hard to protect the papaya. Maybe I did too well because I forgot to come back and take the box off. It's still got some firmness in the stem, so the time will tell. Interestingly enough, the dragon fruit did pretty darn good. The loquat did fine. The betel, not so great. The pineapple guava looks fabulous. A few burnt leaves, but that is all. So overall, I'd say this was pretty good. Now, that didn't survive. The purslane. I just think it's interesting that the dragon fruit seems to have come through relatively unscathed. Now, I did not add any lights under here. I didn't do anything other than cover it up. I did not expect the tomatoes and basil to make it through this, but I'm really glad to see that the pineapple guava did. And I suspect that the passion fruit is going to be pretty hard to kill. We have just frozen the leaves, and so I have a feeling it will be back with a vengeance in a few months. Well, Mother Nature reared her cold, bitter head here, but I don't have nearly the amount of loss that I expected. I was particularly worried about my trees. Some of them, time will tell, but overall, the things that shouldn't be able to take the cold simply didn't, and some of the things surprised me that did. So if you have some suggestions about how maybe I could do this differently next year or next time, I'd certainly welcome in the comments below. Meantime, I'm going to be thinking about that myself because this is just now a few days into official winter. So it's possible we'll still have some freezing weather here in our Northeast Florida garden. If you like this content, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel if you'd like to know more about what's going on in our Northeast Florida garden. We're nearly at our 2,500 subscriber mark, and we're doing a big giveaway here, more than $400 worth of prizes on our very first live. And last I checked, we were just 50 subscribers away from that. So I hope that you'll consider subscribing and join us so you can join in on the fun on our first live. Until next time, my friends, remember to drink plenty of water, wear that high quality sunscreen, and of course, have a fantastic day.